All right, ready to go deep on Tim Burton?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we're diving into Tim Burton's career, how his styles evolved, and what people are saying about the new Beetlejuice sequel.
Yeah, and we're looking at this through a fascinating lens, too. A YouTube movie review, but not just any review. It's from a Spanish-speaking YouTuber, which adds a whole other layer to how they see Burton and his work.
I like it. Adds a global perspective.
Definitely. And they get right to it, too. They start with this question, which Tim Burton is your Tim Burton?
Oh, I love that.
It makes you think, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
Which era of his films really speaks to you? I mean, is it early Burton?
Right.
Like that gothic romance of Edward Scissorhands?
Yes, with that iconic imagery, Johnny Depp sculpting ice with those scissor hands.
That's so good.
Or maybe it's the stop-motion magic of Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, see, for me, Nightmare Before Christmas is it.
It's just pure Burton, isn't it?
It's pure Burton, and it's that handcrafted charm. Like you can practically see the fingerprints on those sets.
Absolutely. It's tangible. You feel the artistry in every frame.
And he started with that, that incredibly tactile, handmade aesthetic. But then as technology advanced, CGI started playing a larger role.
It did. And for some, it's where the debate starts.
Yeah.
Has that embrace of technology kind of overshadowed some of that initial charm?
It's interesting, this reviewer. They seem to be drawn more to those earlier films.
Which, aligns with the common critique of some of his later work.
Makes you wonder, maybe we need one of those quizzes, like those "What decade do you actually belong in?" quizzes.
I love those.
But for directors, what Tim Burton era matches your soul?
That's hilarious.
You're right.
But also kind of genius, right? Because it speaks to how deeply we connect with art on a personal level.
100%.
It's not just technical or critical acclaim, it's how a film makes you feel.
Yes, exactly. And this ties right into the reviewer's take on Beetlejuice 2. They enjoyed it. They gave it a thumbs up, praised the costumes, Winona Ryder's return, but they also point out that it doesn't quite hit those same heights as the original.
I get that.
It's like revisiting your childhood home, but it's been renovated.
Ooh, I like that.
It's familiar, but different.
Yeah, and that's the challenge with these legacy sequels, isn't it? How do you recapture that original magic but still offer something new?
It's a tough one.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure. Honoring the nostalgia, but pushing creative boundaries. It sounds like, in this case, the reviewer felt like Burton maybe leaned a little too heavily into the nostalgia.
Interesting.
Which might explain why some critics felt it lacked a certain spark.
Yeah. But it sounds like this reviewer still found a lot to enjoy, especially visually.
Oh, absolutely.
They call out Monica Bellucci's role, which was limited.
Yes.
And they're joking about it. Like she's probably only on set for a day, just walking down hallways.
Hilarious. And also feels very on brand for Burton, right?
Oh, yeah.
That visual style, the blend of whimsy and the macabre. But that comment, even though it seems like a little throwaway joke, actually hints at a bigger point the reviewer makes.
Okay, I love when there's a deeper layer. Tell me more.
So they use that observation about Bellucci's limited role to touch on a recurring critique of Burton's work, and that's that sometimes his female characters, no matter how visually stunning they are, aren't given the same depth or complexity as their male counterparts.
And that makes me wonder, does our view of his female characters change depending on which Burton era we're talking about?
That is a really good question, and honestly, I think you might be onto something there. Because when you look back at his films, there's definitely a pattern there.
Right.
These visually striking but kind of narratively underserved female characters.
Yeah.
It's almost like they exist to enhance the aesthetic, to add to that gothic fairy tale atmosphere he's known for.
Okay, so is that intentional? Like a conscious choice on Burton's part?
Mm-hmm.
Or just like a byproduct of his directing style?
It's tough to say for sure. But remember, Burton's talked about his fascination with outsiders, with characters who feel misunderstood or out of place.
Right.
And you can see that empathy in his portrayals, I think.
Right.
Even when those characters aren't given a ton of space, narratively speaking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes you think about films like Edward Scissorhands or Ed Wood. I mean, both center around these male protagonists who are grappling with their identities, trying to find their place in the world.
Exactly.
And yeah, the female characters aren't always front and center, but they play key roles in those journeys.
Absolutely. I mean, think about Winona Ryder as Kim in Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, such a good performance.
Initially, she's drawn to his otherness, to Edward's artistic talent, his gentle nature, but she also recognizes the fear and prejudice he faces from those small-minded people in their town.
Of course.
She becomes his protector, his guide. She helps him navigate a world that just doesn't get him.
Yes. And we see that dynamic in other Burton films, too. These female characters, even in supporting roles, they often have this wisdom, this strength that the male characters don't.
It's true.
It's like they're the anchors,
Right.
the emotional anchors in these fantastical, often chaotic worlds that he creates.
Yeah.
Which actually makes me think about something else the reviewer mentioned.
Okay, yeah.
They were blown away by the expanded underworld in Beetlejuice, too. Called it a visual feast.
Well, of course. I mean, Burton's always been a master of world building. And the underworld in Beetlejuice, come on.
Right.
It was practically begging for a sequel. Those immersive environments, familiar and strange all at once.
Totally.
That blend of Gothic architecture, German expressionism, even carnival sideshows, you know?
Oh, and you can't forget those looming twisted trees.
Right. They're practically their own characters.
Always.
They just add to that unease, that otherworldliness
Yep.
that just permeates his work. Yeah, back to the underworld for a second.
Yeah.
The reviewer sees its expansion in Beetlejuice 2 as Burton returning to his roots, visually speaking.
Interesting.
Less CGI, more practical effects, and intricate set design, which harkens back to his earlier work.
So we're seeing a full circle moment in his career.
I think so. He starts with that handcrafted aesthetic,
Yeah.
embraces technology, and now returns to those hand-built worlds
I like that.
with some modern updates, of course.
Of course. Of course.
And that evolution, or re-evolution, I guess, is what makes this so interesting to talk about.
It is.
Because it gets at these bigger ideas, artistic growth, how technology impacts art, the challenge of staying true to your vision while trying new things.
Like Burton's career is a microcosm of the entire filmmaking landscape.
Yes.
This huge shift towards CGI-driven blockbusters.
Yeah.
But then there's this renewed interest in practical effects.
Yeah.
And those more tactile filmmaking techniques.
Exactly. That tension between old and new, between what technology allows and what just works on an emotional level. That's what Burton's wrestling with.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's something that any artist working as long as he has can relate to.
It's wild to think about, right? Like we've gone from those early films where every detail felt so hands-on to this era where CGI is almost like another paintbrush for him.
And you know, it's not just about having the technology, it's about how you use it. Sometimes it adds to the magic, like those incredible landscapes in Alice in Wonderland, but then other times it feels a bit like, I don't know, like he's trying to force something that doesn't quite fit.
Right. Like CGI gives you endless possibilities, but sometimes that simpler approach, that more tactile feel, is what really screams Burton.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, if he had today's tech back when he made the original Beetlejuice, would he have even used it? Or would he have stuck with those practical effects?
Now, that is a fascinating question, and it gets to the heart of this whole thing, right? Artistic vision versus technology. It's like giving a painter an endless palette of colors. Does it make them a better artist? Or is it about knowing which colors to choose?
It's about the skill, not just the tools.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does that leave Beetlejuice 2 in all of this? This reviewer seemed to enjoy it, but it also sounds like they had some mixed feelings.
You know, I think that's a really common reaction to these legacy sequels, especially with directors like Burton who have such passionate fans.
We're invested.
We are. We come to these films with our own baggage, our own memories, our expectations. It's like we're trying to recreate your favorite childhood meal. The ingredients might be the same, but the experience is different.
You can't go home again.
Exactly.
And that nostalgia factor is huge with Burton, isn't it? I mean, his films are practically pop culture icons at this point.
They are.
The merchandise, the quotes, everything. So how do you make a sequel that honors that legacy without just feeling like a rehash?
It's tough. It's a balancing act, for sure. But I think what matters, and what I think this reviewer was getting at, is that a good sequel needs to bring something new to the table.
Right. Build on the original, not just repeat it.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, it's about recognizing that the audience has evolved too. What we connected with 20 years ago might not hit the same way today. And that's okay.
It's like you said before, it's not just about technical stuff or fancy visuals.
Right.
It's about how a film makes you feel.
Yes.
And sometimes that means letting go of our expectations and embracing the unexpected.
Perfectly said. So to bring this all back around, I think the big takeaway here is, which Tim Burton is your Tim Burton? Is a question only you can answer.
I like that.
It's about reflecting on what drew you to his work,
Right.
what still resonates, and yeah, maybe what doesn't hold the same magic anymore.
Because sometimes art tastes change.
And you.
It's a good reminder that our relationship with art is always evolving, just like the artists themselves.
It's true.
And who knows, maybe revisiting those films we loved years ago, we'll find something totally new in them.
Absolutely. Like that saying, you never step in the same river twice.
Okay, that's perfect. I love that.
And on that note,
Yeah.
one last thought for you to ponder. What if Monica Bellucci's character, with that amazing presence she has, had been the central figure in Beetlejuice 2?
Oh, wow.
How would that have changed the entire film?
Now that is something to think about.
It is something to chew on as you explore the wonderfully weird world of Tim Burton.
And that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.